So, let's talk about a huge question. How do you give an entire country an economic checkup? We're going to break down the tools economists use, starting with the one you always hear about. And then we'll dig a whole lot deeper to see what it really misses.
Right, so how do you actually take the pulse of an economy? Is it all about how much money is sloshing around, or is there, a lot more to the story? That's the big question we're tackling today, and trust me, the answer is way more fascinating than you might think.
All right, so the first stop, the place everyone starts, is with the GDP report card. It's that big number you hear on the news all the time, the one that makes politicians either throw a party or start to sweat. But what is it actually measuring?
To put it simply, gross domestic product, or GDP, is the grand total of everything a country produces and sells in a given time. Think of it like this. If a country were a giant store, GDP is the final number on the cash register at the end of the year. It's all about economic activity.
To really get your head around this, it helps to picture the economy as one big loop. You've got money flowing from us, the households, to businesses when we buy stuff. And then that same money flows right back to us in the form of wages or profits. It's kind of like the circulatory system for the economy, and GDP is just trying to measure how much is flowing through it.
Now, one of the main ways they measure that flow is by adding up all the spending. So you take what we as consumers spend, plus what businesses invest, plus what the government spends, and then you add in net exports. That's just what we sell to other countries minus what we buy from them. All of that gets added up to give you that one big GDP number.
But, and this is a huge but, this is where things get tricky. That single number, as tidy as it looks, can be a really misleading test result. It doesn't give us the full picture of a country's health. In fact, sometimes it hides more than it shows.
Which leads us to a really important question. We're all basically trained to think that when GDP goes up, it's good news, that bigger is always better. But is it really?
And this right here gets to the absolute heart of the problem. See, GDP doesn't care what we're making. You can have a huge jump in GDP because a country is building more weapons. But would you say that's better than a country that spends more on healthcare and education? Probably not. GDP just counts the dollars. It doesn't judge. And the list of what GDP misses? It's huge. Think about all the unpaid work people do, like taking care of family. GDP ignores it. It misses the entire black market. It tells you nothing about whether one person has all the money or if it's spread out. It doesn't even tell you if people are just working insane hours to get that number up. It's a snapshot with a lot of holes.
So, to get a better diagnosis, we need to go beyond that first simple test. We need some more advanced tools. And there is no better example of why this matters than the really strange thing that happened in Ireland a few years back.
Okay, get this. In 2015, Ireland reported that its GDP had grown by a mind-blowing 26.3%. Let that sink in. 26.3%. For context, a really good year for a developed economy is like 3 or 4%. This number was so bonkers, it basically broke the economic world for a minute. The whole situation was so absurd that Nobel-winning economist Paul Krugman gave it a now famous nickname, leprechaun economics. I mean, it sounded like something out of a fairy tale because it didn't match what anyone was actually experiencing on the ground. So what on earth was going on? Well, it wasn't because Irish people suddenly became 26% more productive overnight. Nope. What really happened was that a handful of huge multinational companies, probably for tax reasons, moved around 300 billion euros worth of assets, stuff like patents and even entire fleets of airplanes, onto their books in Ireland. That activity counted towards GDP, but that money wasn't actually helping the average person in Ireland at all.
And this whole episode just blew the lid off a massive problem with using GDP in a globalized world. The profits made by a big foreign company in Ireland get counted in Ireland's GDP, but a lot of that money eventually gets sent back home to the company's headquarters. It doesn't stay and circulate in the Irish economy.
So to fix this mess, economists have to make some key adjustments. They start with that big GDP number, but then they subtract all the money that's flowing out of the country, like those big corporate profits. That adjustment is called net factor income from abroad. Once you do that, you get a much more realistic number known as gross national product, or GNP.
And you can refine it even more to get to gross national income, or GNI. And this is often seen as a much better measure because it focuses on what really matters, the total income that is actually earned by the people and businesses of a country, no matter where they earned it. For a place like Ireland, GNI tells a much, much truer story than GDP ever could.
But hold on. Even with a better metric like GNI, we're still just talking about money, right? What if a real economic health checkup needs to look beyond that? What if it's about measuring a country's total well-being?
Because, at the end of the day, a nation's health isn't just its wealth. I mean, you can have a high national income, but that doesn't automatically mean that your people are happy, healthy, and educated.
And that is exactly where something like the Human Development Index, or HDI, comes into play. It gives you a much fuller picture by combining income with two other really crucial things for a good life: health, which it measures through life expectancy, and education. It's a powerful way to remember that progress is about so much more than just money.
So, the next time you see that headline, GDP is up, now you'll know there's a much deeper story. You'll know to ask, okay, but what kind of growth is it? Who's actually benefiting from it? And are people's lives, their health, their education, actually getting better too? Because asking those questions, well, that's how you perform a real economic checkup. Thanks for tuning in.